Hello, my name is Polly Aird, and I wrote a book called Mormon Convert, Mormon Defector. We can see it here. I live in Seattle. Joe Geisner, the editor for Writing Mormon History, Historians in their books, this new book that's come out, asked if I would contribute a chapter describing how I wrote my book. I was glad to do it because I thought my experience might help others to start writing their own. I'm a practicing Catholic, but I have a Mormon connection. My great-great-grandparents, the McCauslins, and their family came from Scotland as Mormon converts in the early 1850s. The family consisted of the senior McCauslins, their 2 older married sons and their wives, and 7 other mostly grown children. My grandmother, Emily, who was born after the family left the Mormons, wrote their story based on what her mother had told her years before. Her account is dramatic. Among her stories are the youngest child being killed by an Indian arrow on the plains. Later, the mother dying, but asking her husband to go back so she could be buried by her child. The McCauslins had met a young man, Davy, on the ship, and he joined their family. The family bought him a wagon, which he then turned into a hospital for the sick on the overland trip. The McCauslins settled in Salt Lake City and built a large barn. The bishop came one day and said he was taking it to house new immigrants. Davy objected and said the family needed it for their animals in the harsh winter, but the bishop said, "It belongs to the Lord." Davy was disappeared. When the family went looking for him, they were told many had disappeared and that, quote, "we must obey the prophet." The men took the animals south to Spanish Fork. They left the women in Salt Lake City with provisions until they had a place prepared for them. But the bishop took the women's provisions, saying, "In Zion we share and share alike." The bishop would visit my great-grandmother Mary and bring food. One day the bishop proposed to her. She reminded him that she was already married. He said he could fix that. Mary threw the ham that he had just brought at him and called him a dirty dog and told him to get out. The men arrived back one night and said they must flee immediately to the protection of the army. The army escorted them out of Utah, so they escaped to California. So how much of Emily's story was true? I have a degree in history from Stanford, but it was in modern European history. I knew nothing of Scottish, Utah, or Mormon history in the 19th century, and nothing about Mormonism. Where was I to begin? I knew Wallace Stegner had written a book called The Gathering of Zion, so I started there. It also had a good bibliography, so I got some of those books from the library or interlibrary loan and kept on reading. I realized soon that I needed primary, original sources, so I started making trips to Salt Lake to the church history library. So what did I find? That Mormons keep amazing records, membership and tithing records, diaries of contemporaries, etc., and now many of these are available online. 5 years into my research, I was working at the time, I discovered a cousin in California had a trunk. What trunk? I asked. It belonged to my great-great-uncle, Peter McCauslin, the first in the family to convert and the first to become disillusioned. The trunk was a gold mine. It contained draft letters he had written, notes, even a diary, but it stopped after he got seasick on the ship. One letter told why he had converted and why he became disillusioned. So Peter became my protagonist. My research into the 1850s brought surprises. the many natural disasters in Utah, locust and cricket plagues, freezing winters when much of the livestock died, drought, famine, the handcart disasters when more than 200 people died, the Mormon Reformation and Brigham Young's preaching of blood atonement, that is, that some sins are so egregious that the only way to atone for them is to have your neck slit and your blood fall onto the ground. The killing of several individuals who were trying to leave, the massacre at Mountain Meadows, and the Utah War. We can be glad we didn't have to live through that fanatical time. The McCauslins asked the Army for an escort out of Utah, and about 40 families left. It's the only time I know of when the Army helped escort religious refugees. The McCauslins settled in northern Sacramento Valley and left Mormonism behind. In the end, I discovered that many of Emily's stories were myths, but the outline was true and got me started on this great adventure. The book, Writing Mormon History, is full of interesting stories. Each historian had a different tale on how he or she found their topic, the challenges they faced, but also the passion they developed for writing their books.